Let me know what you guys think. Is it working? Can you hear me? All that sort of stuff. I've got a little. I started a few minutes early because I got a little bit of prep work to do on Scream here. So first and foremost, though, I need to hear from you guys that it is working because YouTube is telling me that it's not working, even though it clearly looks on screen as though that it is working. So I'm just gonna minimize this for now. And where is my chat window? All right. All right, cool. Yeah, chat's working. Cool. Let's go ahead and get this out. We don't need that for now. And so while it spools up, I'm just going to draw this really quick. For anybody who knows what this is, then you will be able to grade my penmanship. So let's just do... Oh, that's terrible. We're going to... Thank God for the undo brush. Yeah. Something like that. Oh, you know what? I screwed it up. This should never be higher than that one. Shucks, that was good too. Nope. Nope. Don't like that curve either. All right, I can live with that one. There we go. Visibly lower. Cool. Got it. So the reason I drew that on screen is because exactly what I'm seeing in the chat here. Um, People think that, and I saw this a couple times in the comments. People think that I make these types of videos for the purposes of being a condescending asshole. That you know that I'm think that I've got some kind of superiority complex and all that sort of stuff. That is could not be farther from the truth. All right. In fact, I believe the exact opposite. I think that all of you are smart enough to handle this information, and I think that it's criminal that the basis of a lot of the information that I use on a regular basis was derived from post-secondary education. I think it's criminal that to be able to obtain this sort of thing, it's sequestered behind a massive paywall at some kind of university or something like that. I don't think that that's fair. I think that you guys can totally handle this type of information, and it's just often not taught in a way in a lot of schools these days where it's easily transferable to the real world. And I suppose also when you get your introductory to it when you're 16, 17 years old, a lot of times you may have some other things on your mind at the time, right? So what I drew this for is I would say that on this curve, I sit somewhere around in this area. Okay, I am by no means an expert, but I know enough to know that at some point in time, I was here. Okay, and I have since had a series of lessons that have brought me down to realize that, yeah, I don't know as much as I thought I knew at one point in time. And I think a lot of times, people in my position that have to consistently create content for the internet find themselves up here or somewhere on this side of the peak. And because of that, they get called out on something and have to defend their position super hard, even if they're wrong. And I think it's led to a toxic environment on the internet these days. And so that's why I drew that in the opening. So if you guys haven't looked at the research on the Dunning-Kruger effect, it's a pretty cool read. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and get out of that. We're not going to need that for the rest of this. Now, did the chat die? Let's see here. Nope, chat's still, it looks like it's still running. I don't need that. Why is, oh no, okay, yeah. So somebody in the chat also said, where is the chart is clickbait title? So here's the thing. as someone who has to create content and get you to at least invest your time to click it or capture you in some way, the internet has created this mentality of clickbait. And here's the thing. Before the internet was created, the term clickbait was called a headline. And they still use those in newspapers and things like that today. But the idea that this is a new phenomenon and this is something that is unfair to the viewer is something. This is something that's been going on for hundreds of years. So the idea that I captured you by getting you to come in and listen to the things that I wanted to say was something that was alluring in the title, doesn't mean that I perpetrated something against you. What that means is that I'm doing my job correctly. Now, did I provide information in the video that bolstered my point? I feel as though I did. I feel like a large segment of the audience feels as though I did. So to call it clickbait in a negative connotation, it just wasn't what those people thought that they were going to get, which is somehow we created a suppressor that doesn't fall under the definitions of the National Firearms Act, which hopefully, given the current court situation, gets overturned anyway. But regardless of that situation, I feel as though there's just this hyper expectation these days, and there is a line that a creator has to walk with being able to bring people in to see what it is they're talking about. And I don't think that the video that I did was bad. So anyway, let's move on to the first couple topics that I wanted to cover from yesterday's video that I think are really pertinent, especially going forward to the project that I'm currently working on, which is the suppressor test head-to-head. And at the end of the stream today, I will give you a list of the cans that I plan to test in that video, so you guys will have an idea of what that looks like. Also, if at any point you do have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we will take breaks between a couple of the topics that I wanted to address and answer questions, as well as just kind of get general feedback on where I'm at, because I'm not going to say that what I am saying is the absolute, you must take this as gospel and go out and live your life from there. I'm just saying that this is what I've found from my experience on the topics. Oh, also, real quick shout out. I'm wearing a hoodie today. I've got my air conditioning cranked all the way up because I wanted to wear Jared from Guns and Gadgets, their hoodies today. Brother, I need a shirt. Help me out, man. It's July and it's hot here. Also drinking my blackout coffee. Not to be confused with Black Rifle coffee. Okay, so the first topic that I saw over and over again in the comment section is that suppressors don't reduce recoil by their function. And they absolutely do reduce recoil by their function. There's a misconception that the act of adding the weight of the can to the end of the firearm is what actually decreases the recoil. And if you do the math, that doesn't work out. So the numbers that I gave you and the numbers that I will give you in the video coming later this week account for the mass change. So for anybody who's not tracking, to break it down to bare bones, if you shoot the firearm unsuppressed, it weighs less than if you put a 1.5 pound can on the end of it. Okay, and in doing so, what you have done is change the characteristics of the inertia that you're going to generate. So by adding a weight to the end of the gun, by changing the mass of the gun, do you inherently decrease the recoil? Yes, sort of. What you actually do is increase the mass of the system, and therefore any momentum that you generate is going to change. So if that was the case, then you would probably perceive it as about the same if you just added some weight to the end of it. Because, again, once you get that mass moving, it's going to continue to move. It may just be slightly less. And the way that a suppressor works basically is to capture the gas, slow it down, cool it down, and vent it out slowly. I did say that one of the prime functions of a suppressor is to reduce recoil. I did not say that it was the primary function of a suppressor to reduce recoil. It's just ranked along the line. So there's a couple reasons you would purchase a suppressor. The biggest one is sound reduction, and that can be to the hearing safe level, or that can be to just the ability to communicate. So that's where the K cans come in, the really short cans that aren't hearing safe, but it knocks down a lot of the concussion so that you can communicate with people a lot better. That's where the utility of that comes in. But then those cans also shine quite a bit when we're talking about just changing the recoil profile of the firearm. So yes, people do indeed purchase suppressors for the purposes of reducing recoil, not just to be as freaking quiet as possible. Particularly if you're talking about shooting them on a firearm that fires supersonic projectiles like a 5.56 gun or something like that. So you may very well purchase cans for the purposes of reducing recoil. It just traditionally isn't thought of in terms of being the main thing that you would purchase it for. And I would never say that the main purpose of purchasing a suppressor is to reduce the recoil, but it is in the things that you should consider. So as I mentioned, when I do the math that I'll show you in the next video, it will account for those mass changes. And those numbers, to put it simply, those numbers that you will get are above and beyond the change that you would have expected if you had just added a weight to the end of it of the same mass. And I think that there's another video in there that we can do where I literally just go make a weight to put at the end of the gun and use the same apparatus to be like, hey, look, here it is. Suppressed, unsuppressed, and just a weight attached to the end of it. If that's something you guys might be interested in seeing, then please, by all means, sound off, and we'll do that. Let's see here. Okay, so on that point, let me go to the chat, see if there's any questions specific to that one, because that's going to feed into the next thing where I wanted to talk about how, in fact, they reduce recoil. And I've done some videos on this in the past. So, oh, coffee. Yes, somebody says they need coffee. Yes, get your coffee. I'm actually doing really good. I used to be at danger level on my caffeine intake every day. About a year and a half ago, I was taking almost a gram of caffeine every day, and now I'm down to about 300 and some milligrams a day. So that's the equivalent of about 3 cups of coffee, depending on your roast. So I think that's an improvement. Somebody says, I'm patiently waiting for the ATF to say that I can have my rights. First can should be in my hands in just a few months. Congratulations. I hope that's working well for you. Did you use the e-form system for your Form 4? Question mark. Because I'm interested to see what those lead times are working on. I have noticed that some of the paper ones that I submitted last year are coming in ahead of schedule. Excuse me. So, as in, I expected them to be done in a couple months, and they've been here early, and I suspect that is because a lot of the paper traffic died once they announced the electronic Form 4. So let me know if you did that. Votes positive for the dead weight versus the can. Yep. Okay, cool. Somebody says a can effectively augment velocity such that it functions similar to adding barrel length. Yes, actually. So this is a misnomer that I see all the time, in that particularly in the, and don't take this the wrong way for anybody who is of this persuasion, the video game crowd. I like video games, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times those bars on the Call of Duty game say that the gun's less powerful, and people think that is like the gun got slower, like somehow the suppressor slowed down the bullet, that cannot be farther from the truth. The only way that happens if you're using a wipe can. I do not suggest that you use wipe cans. The only exception to that is I like the energetic arms box. It has the capacity to add a wipe to the end of it. Generally speaking, I don't use that because I think that wipe technology is trash. But you essentially get another half baffle for free by just not putting the wipe in that can. But a modern silencer should at no point contact the projectile. And in fact, if you sit next to a chronograph that's sensitive enough, you will typically see a small increase in velocity from putting the can on the gun versus having it off. And as the commenter alludes to, it's not worth its inches in barrel. So if I put a 6-inch silencer on the end of a 14.5-inch barrel, that's not worth 20.5-inch barrel. Okay, it's worth some percentage of a barrel, and I don't know what that is. It differs can to can, depends how they're bored, depends what the flow looks like. It all has to do with sequestering that gas and allowing a little bit more burn time before it fully vents into the ambient space. So yes, it will increase your velocity slightly. So anybody who's ever told you that they reduce the velocity or inhibit the bullet in any way, stop listening to them. Says, okay, that individual that I talked about earlier said that they did submit their e-form, or their form by e-forms, and they are given a September projection for approval. So yeah, that's it. They submitted in June and they're getting in September. That's a lot faster. Somebody says the video game is not. You mean the video game isn't 100% accurate? Yeah, I know. Games are getting a lot better, guys. I mean, they're getting pretty good. Just look at the video game footage that passed off as that Ukrainian fighter pilot for so long. I mean, like I immediately knew what it was because I've seen that game before because my brother plays it. Uh, but if I hadn't seen that before or hadn't seen the thing that gave it away to me was the way that the screen moved, the person trying to film moved was clearly a mouse moving across the screen. There are little nuances that you can see in the way the head moved that was clearly somebody using a mouse to move the screen. So my girlfriend's calling me. Sorry, babe. I will call you back afterwards. Hang on. Sorry. Okay. All right. So now to the next topic. Oh, one more that I think is pertinent to this that actually will lead us into our next topic here. How much quieter are cans going to get because of 3D printing versus CNC construction? So now I can't say for certain, but given what we currently can do with 3D printing and what we have traditionally done with traditional manufacturing processes like lathes and CNCs and things like that, you aren't going to suddenly just discover like 50% increase in technological capacity. Anybody who works in the suppressor space that actually builds the cans, so this isn't my words, I agree with them, but like if you ask any of the heavy hitters that are looking into additive manufacturing for things, they're saying you might squeeze out an additional 5% out of the performance of that device because they're just things that you can't do or you could do in multiple parts or would be very difficult to do with traditional manufacturing capacities that 3D printing, like laser sintered Inconel production, for instance, can just, snap it into existence type thing. So I think as the technology goes down in price, I think we'll see a lot of innovation, but I'm saying 5%, maybe 7 or 8% improvement over what you're currently seeing. I don't think that anybody's just going to blow it out of the water. And I think that really what you're working against is you have a finite amount of space to work with, and there's only so many ways that you can make that change to make it do a thing. And if you had unlimited space, then yeah, you could probably do some very intricate things, but you have to be able to carry it around. It has to be wieldy. It has to be able to swing. It has to not inhibit the function if you're talking about something that relies on the action of the firearm. There's a whole bunch of parameters that we have to stay inside of, and because of that, there's only so much that you can do with it. So, somebody says, how much does my flash reduction factor into my can preference? So I'm actually going to answer that question, and does material matter, which is the one right below it. I'm going to answer that in point 3 that I want to talk about today, because I feel like both of those questions really tie very heavily into those. So I'm actually going to write that down really quick, so because it's probably going to get populated out. So really quick, does flash reduction play a huge role, and does material matter? Okay, so that's down towards the bottom of the notes. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, shifting gears slightly, is there were several comments on the video that talked about the recoil and how the easiest way to say that is I believe that there's a fundamental misunderstanding with a lot of folks on how recoil works and how the devices that we put on the end of the firearms then interact with those firearms to reduce that recoil. So there are, as far as I can tell, 3 sources of input that cause what you perceive as recoil. The first one that you can all kind of figure out is there's an explosion that happens inside that barrel, or inside that chamber, excuse me. And on one side of the explosion, you have a bullet. And on the other side of the explosion, you have a bolt that's locked up. And I know that I'm being very simple here, but those two push against each other, and being that one is fixed against steel on steel, the bullet moves down the barrel. And the gun that is locked up against the bolt then moves away from the projectile into you. Given that the gun is much heavier than the projectile, and you are much heavier than the projectile is going to be the thing that moves. And it's going to get going, whipping really fast. You'll notice that if we go ahead and come back to Photoshop here for a second, and just we'll just do a drawing really quick, just to kind of give us an idea of what we're working with here. We got a tube, right? We got a bullet. Force is going that way. Force is going that way. Okay. You'll notice that the net direction really is only in this plane. So the motion that is occurring, the vectors of those forces, is one going that way and one going that way. Notice that it is not up and down. It is not going up and down at all. All right. So somewhere along the lines, if it's a semi-automatic firearm, the second source of recoil is going to be, a lot of times you have some kind of gas port here that is then going to siphon some gas off, right? Oh, that is the ugliest arrow ever. My goodness gracious, I should change colors. Undo, delete that. That's the worst. Oh man, this is the worst arrow I think I've ever used. Okay, so siphons gas off like this to run the bolt. Well, you'll notice again that the the vector of that force is that way, and that bolt ultimately is going to move backwards, but ideally that bolt is just kind of going to hit a spring and compress that spring, and that is going to add force into your shoulder, but not a whole lot. But we want it provided, or excuse me, that is of course provided that we have the gun gassed properly. So the other source of recoil is an improperly gassed gun in which the bolt literally bottoms out the spring and either contacts the receiver or the buffer tube. So you can feel this if you've got a gun that's improperly gassed. The recoil will be dramatically higher if the gun is over gassed to the extreme. So in our test that I did the video on, and I also will be editing the second installment, we actually turned the gas off because I wanted to eliminate this whole process. So this is not present in the test that you guys saw and the test that you will see. And then the last thing that I think occurs when it comes to forces on you is what I'm going to call, or forces that generate recoil, is what I'm going to call the rocket cone effect, which is at some point this projectile is going to leave, right? So at some point it's going to leave, and that means that where'd it go? And that means that come on, man. Oh, I need to deselect. See, this is why I should have practiced a little bit before I goodness gracious. Thank you. At some point, this is going to leave, and this gas is going to escape, okay? And in doing so, it's going to create some kind of push. Now, the interesting thing about this one that we talked about, the first one that we talked about, is that that's what makes the bullet go, right? This, the second one that we talked about, is what we use to operate the gun. And then this last one is what we use to operate a comp, or what a suppressor captures to be able to reduce the recoil. So what we do with a comp, a muzzle brake, or a suppressor is take this gas and convert it to meaningful work. You'll notice that all of these move in a net this direction. Man, that's a terrible arrow. None of them do this. So why on earth does the muzzle rise when you pull the trigger? Why does muzzle flip occur? Muzzle flip occurs because at some point in here, we have added an axis of rotation. So either a hand on a grip, a hand on a handguard, somewhere in there, we've created an anchor point that this force wants to go this way, but is being tied down. So what that does is basically curve itself like that and then lift the barrel ultimately. So what that means is that muzzle flip is a function of how much force is going rearward. How much inertia have you generated to push the thing rearward? So any device that you put on the end of the gun that is going to create a net forward force, or excuse me, not net forward force, that is going to create some kind of forward drag, is going to reduce muzzle flip and then also reduce felt recoil. So people talk about these things like they're separate things, and they're actually one and the same. One is a derivation of the other. So using that in our brain, if we think about a suppressor in terms of what it is, it's essentially a compensator with a tube around it. And what it's doing is redirecting that gas in ways to divert it other than forward. And so when you look at the comp that we used in that video, what we have is basically the idea is to blow a whole bunch of it out of the sides while using that energy to pull the gun forward. Also, for the little bit that we induced by, because remember, this all happened, I put them 1, 2, 3, because they happen in that order. The push happens, then the action cycles, and then the gas leaves the end of the barrel. And that happens very quickly, but in doing so, we can harness the energy at different stages to be able to do different things. So with the compensator, what it has done is pulled the gun forward, and then those 2 ports at the front are there to mitigate some of that vertical rise. And that's why the comp seems to shoot very flat. Same thing with Suppressor, only it does it all in the forward motion. So that is my expression of the misconception of recoil and how it occurs. It does not matter where the gun was clamped in the apparatus. I think somebody said that was a contributing factor. What matters is that the muzzle flip will always occur also, because you're like, oh, Kurt, well, if I just set the gun on the table, then it's still going to muzzle flip. Yes, it is, because we live on a planet, and remember that there is an axis of rotation that has been induced by the planet's gravitational field. So it is accelerating the gun downward. So there's going to be something that causes the gun to rotate around an axis no matter what. We just artificially locked our axis in the test apparatus that I created. So again, there's just I think there was a fundamental misconception of how recoil works, and this is how brakes and comps and suppressors mitigate that recoil for the term. So let's see. Okay. So I'm done with Photoshop for now. So where's my OBS here? So I can come back to full screen for you guys. Did that work? I think that worked. Where is my chat? Chat. Did I lose my? Oh no, there it is. Okay. Okay. Questions on that one? Let's see. Where was I? I think it was around in here somewhere. My head is going to be in the way. Somebody says, I tend to listen to California politicians about guns and say, you're wrong on everything. Muzzle flip is when the back thingy hits the clip and feeds a magazine into the bullet. Yes, that's totally how that works. Okay, so the last one that I wanted to talk about, seeing no questions specifically about that one, is I have a real, and this kind of ties into some of the stuff we talked about at the beginning when it comes to people's expectations when they're shopping for a can. The big problem that I see a lot when people are talking about cans is they focus too heavily on DB numbers. So if you're looking at DB numbers when it comes to shopping for a can, that number, if you're going to spend an hour researching a device, you should spend about 4 seconds on the DB numbers. And this comes to some of the things I saw in the comments about about how data isn't cross-reportable. Like somebody couldn't replicate this thing and get the same results. No, they can't, because in my opinion, all of the data that you are fed by manufacturers when it comes to suppressors is bullshit. The number that you want when you are shopping for a can is average relative dB reduction, and you're never going to get that. Very rarely do those numbers exist. And what I mean by that is that you need that can tested multiple replicates against its peers in the same place at the same time under the same conditions using the same guns. And you're likely not going to get that. The reason why that is important is because somebody is just going to feed you some raw DB data, and there are so many variables that go into that there's no way that you can take data that somebody generated on one day and compare it to any other data that was taken on any other day, because there are so many variables packed into that. So let's take a really simplistic example. Let's say, for instance, I live in Ohio and I have a friend in Colorado that wants to do a test side by side. Same devices, say they're the same devices. We're going to use the same meter. I'm just going to send it to them in the mail, right? So that we don't have to worry about having a comparable meter that's calibrated properly. All those sorts of things. We'll just take that right out of the equation. Just by nature of he or she being in Colorado automatically makes his data and my data unable to communicate, because the barometric pressure is much different at 10,000 feet than it is at Ohio's like 1,000, depending on where you are in the state. That's just one variable. Let's not even take into account, and the reason that is because sound operates differently depending on the relative pressure outside. Take also the temperature, the humidity, moving off of the environment a little bit, or you could also say the range top. What's the range conditions? Is it a gravel top range? Is it a cement range? Is it an indoor range, which automatically invalidates everything? So moving out of the environment for a second, let's go to the actual test apparatus. The guns have to be not only the same make and model, but the same damn guns, because there's going to be small variabilities in how much model to or gun serial number to serial number are going to interact with the bullets. Speaking of bullets, the ammunition has to be from the same exact lot of the same exact manufacturer. The operating system, well, I guess I mentioned that with the guns. The guns have to be exactly the same. So that is never going to happen. It does rarely happen. There are sometimes events where manufacturers will get together and they will all test their cans all at once. They are rare occurrences, but generally speaking, they have happened and they will happen in the future. But most of the data that you are going to get from a manufacturer is going to be average dB reduction or raw data. If they just give you raw data, ignore it immediately. If they give you average dB reduction, then they also need to report all the criteria that we mentioned previously, including which firearms they measured them on and which methods they used. If they're giving you ear data, I don't trust ear data. And some people may say, hey, well, that's the important number. Because did they measure it inside? Did they put the microphone inside your ear? Or do they put it right here? Or do they put it over here? So those things matter. And I think that the standard testing methods, while I also don't agree with the standard testing methods that have been developed, there has to at least be some standard where those things, because you could get a little bit higher number and then just move it back, a couple inches and get a completely different number because your head is partially blocking it. So, in my opinion, there has to be if everybody wants ear data, then we have to come up with some kind of metric of this many inches and that many inches and this many inches from a certain point on the ejection port. That's the only way that you can reliably generate that data. So, again, tying that into our test, you either have to have, if you're going to be doing any kind of testing, you either have to have a rigorous, well-defined testing method that is clearly documented, and a control that works with that testing method that eliminates as many variables as possible and focuses the scope of the investigation on the devices and the particular parameter that you're searching for in those devices, and or you have to do all relativistic testing. And that's what I prefer to do. I prefer to do both a control to give us something to look at against, and then relative testing. So don't just put, so that's why in that comp video, we used a unsuppressed and a suppressor and the comp to give us an idea of where we were. So the control would obviously be the unsuppressed gun, but the testing method was designed in such a way that basically the only factor that could possibly impact any of this was what was going on with the firearm discharging. Such to the point that somebody made a point that the numerical data that we derive from the swing, as in the angular measurement, is quantitative data, but it's useless quantitative data until it's derived into useful data, which is, if you look at the calculations that I flashed up on screen really quick, we converted it to energy. And to create and to generate energy, for use of the energy equation, you have to incorporate the mass. And for the mass, I use the mass of the entire system, not just the can. So in doing so, you eliminate a lot of variables all the way through. And you can do, even though it's an apples to orange comparison, you can give some meaningful derivation to your data. So if I just flashed, hey, this one's got an angular measurement of this, and that one's got an angular measurement of that, that doesn't tell you a whole lot. If you just compare those numbers side by side, you wouldn't get a very good representation of the difference between the two, because there are other factors at play. So, long wind. So, that plays into the other two questions that were asked earlier, which are, what role does flash reduction play as far as when I'm evaluating a can? Well, if you watch any of the recent suppressor tests that we've done, it is a prolific part of everything that we test. So every can that comes in is going to get some kind of night test. Before I had night vision, we did it with a night vision capable camera. It was not as sensitive as I would have liked it to be. So we do everything recording through Generation 3 white phosphor PVS-14 from the shooter's perspective. So, and in my opinion, that's the perspective that matters, because that's going to be the disorienting. When you squeeze that round off, if it whites out your night vision, it can be disorienting if you're doing a lot of shooting versus if you're just cooking off one. So flash suppression, as far as suppressors are concerned, is very important. So back to what I was saying earlier, you should spend like 4 seconds on DB data, and then everything else you should spend the majority of your time on. Cost, availability, mounts, flash suppression, recoil reduction, accuracy, all of those things are things that you should be paying much more attention to than just what the DB data that the manufacturer is going to hand to you that they more than most likely cooked. Particularly if they're not giving you the ammunition or the firearm that they tested it on. And then material. What role does material play when it comes to can selection? Well, material goes heavily into two aspects of the decision-making process. First and foremost would be the weight, obviously. So an aluminum can is obviously going to not weigh as much as a steel can. However, an aluminum can is not likely to be able to handle as much as a stainless steel can. So there's a trade-off there. So if you're going out and you plan to suppress a 338 Lapua, then you're going to have to, more than most likely, there are some out there that can handle this, but you're more than most likely going to have to accept a stainless steel or titanium can to be able to suppress those calibers, because an aluminum can is just not likely to be able to handle the kind of forces that we're talking about, the kind of pressures that we're talking about. So when it comes to, it's a very application specific thing. So if you're looking for a rapid fire can that you're going to shoot on an AR-15, you're going to shoot lots of ammunition through it, or you're going to go full auto with it, then you probably need to tend more towards your stainless steel, your Inconel, or your titanium cans. And those are not going to be foolproof, but an aluminum can, generally speaking, is more of a bolt action can or a low pressure round can like a 22 or something like that. Those are going to be the things that you look into. Do they play a huge role when it comes to the sound signature? Not really. A lot of it has to do with the way the gas evolves through the can. Now, the one thing I will say is that titanium cans can be flashier. Sometimes, depending on how the can is constructed, you may see small bits, microscopic bits of titanium metal that has been flashed off of the inside of the can that will come out of the end of the muzzle of the can. And in doing so, those can create flash problems. I've seen it on some cans and not on other cans, so I'm not going to say that it's titanium across the board, but that's something that you would, again, look for in your research for your can. That's something that if you're really intent on using it for like coyote hunting or something like that, it probably would be important to know whether or not that can is going to flash when you bang off the first round. So that's kind of what I would say as far as material is concerned. Material, I would say, get away with the lightest thing that you think that you can get away with. If it's a bolt action can that you're going to hump all the way up a mountain to go shoot a goat or something like that, an aluminum can's probably fine. Even for a 300 Win Mag or something like that. There are cans that are rated for 300 Win Mag that are made out of aluminum. You're going to shoot that gun once, maybe twice or three times for your whole walk up the mountain. Okay? It doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to take machine gun rating. So, that's what I would say about material. Ooh, pushed the wrong button. All right, let's scroll back up. Let's see. Okay, we just got a whole big population, so apparently my chat window was running super behind from the last topic, so I apologize to everybody who commented on the last topic that I didn't, get on your stuff, but for some reason, when I pop the chat out, it doesn't populate nearly as quickly as I would like it to. So, my bad. Let's see if I can find where we were. So, ear canal is bigger than yours. Funny. On a direct thread can, like Whip Machine, would you use a jam nut, or should it be manufactured for that? I would thread that directly onto that can, for instance, is designed to be threaded directly onto your barrel. And actually, when Whip Machine first started shipping, excuse me, when Whip Machine first started making suppressors, they sent me some of their first prototypes, and they came with crush washers. And I'm like, dude, stop that immediately. Now, granted, most of their designs are what I would classify as K cans. So the one can I have from them that's a 30 cal can is actually just as long as that Apollo comp that we tested. So in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter when you're talking about something that is that small as far as the length is concerned. So when we're talking about the best thing to do for a direct thread can is to thread it onto the shoulder of your barrel and thread it tight. And in doing so, you should take some rock set and smear it on the threads. Cinch it up tight and let it sit. Now, I will admit that I'm guilty of this. I've smeared some rock set on it and ran out to the range, and I just put it kind of in the back of the truck to do later. And usually that works, but generally speaking, you want to give it at least 12 hours to set up. And there's a misconception that rock set is permanent. No, it's just hard to get off with heat. You just dunk the can in water for a couple hours, and it'll reconstitute the rock set and come right off. So uh, the idea is that you want the attachment method that gives it something that has been done with a computer-driven CNC that has a right angle on it. You want to take two right angles that were generated by a computer and put them together. Because that can was bored while it was on that lathe, presumably, right? It was bored while it was on that mandrel, and therefore the center is center. So if that is true also of your barrel, then if you take those two right angles and push them together, then generally speaking, they should be fairly correct. You should still go purchase, and I know this is going to hurt because they're like $90. You should still go purchase alignment rods for your cans because, yeah, they're $90, $85, something like that. But I've seen plenty of people in the comment section just yesterday complaining about the cost of cans. So you get your $200 tax stamp. You got, if it's a quality silencer in the 30 cal variety, you're looking somewhere between $700 and $1,200. Do the math. $90 is less than that amount of money, even if no matter where you put it on the thing. So buy once, cry once. Just buy the rods. I prefer the Surefire rods, and be done with it. And you know that it'll be right. I have destroyed more cans because I did not use an alignment rod than if I did any of the hocus pocus talking about don't use a crush washer, do use a jam nut, don't use anything, rock set, Loctite, whatever. Buy the alignment rod. I always thought flash suppressors made it harder to locate your fire, not protect your vision from flash. Do they do both? Was I wrong, or different types? Generally speaking, if you're paying attention, you can see where a firearm went off, even if it's got a flash suppressor on the end of it. That is not, generally speaking, the main function. Yes, will it be substantially reduced? Yes, it will. But if I were to walk out, it'll be dark here, solidly dark here in about 45 minutes. If I took a camera and set it in this window and went over on that hill and discharged a flash suppressed, like, let's use the three-prong thing that comes on the AR, like the A1, right? You're still going to see that. It's going to be dispersed and it's going to be kind of flashy. It's going to look kind of like fireworky, where it's very kind of faint. By fireworky, sorry. When the bombs come out of the tube, you see the thing. It's going to look a lot like that versus a blah. That's the main difference. But the big difference that you're going to see when you're firing it is that you are not going to burn out your night vision. And they can be interpreted a couple ways. By your night vision, I mean your inherent night vision. That's still going to white out your night vision. Like if you're wearing a PVS 14, you're still not gonna. It's still gonna give you a white frame. That's what the suppressor's for. I have heard of pores using a carbon arrow for silencer alignment. Huh. That's a really good point. I never thought about that. Hmm. 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 Yeah. That's a really good point. I never thought about that. I feel like that may be an addendum video. Yeah, that's I hadn't thought about that. I think that that might actually work. Particularly if you got one that's kind of junk that you'd used as your dirt arrow a lot. So I'm a bow hunter, so I could conceivably, yeah, particularly if you get junk ones, right? And they would be long enough, I think, especially the uncuts. Like if you just went to, whatever store and got one, you could probably, yeah. Then moving on. Well, I never knew that there was that much bore alignment issue just screwing on a can. I guess I've gotten to that point. Okay, so yeah, so that's important. It becomes more and more important the longer the can gets. So if you're talking about a K can, it's probably not that important because again, a small variance in angle leads to larger, potentially destructive uh, consequences the longer it gets, right? Because that's just how angles work. So I have a video out on don't use a crush washer. You can go find that. It's still relevant and still works, uh, but it's a really quick synopsis of how that occurs and why you shouldn't use a crush washer when mounting a silencer. The best way, in my opinion, to mount a suppressor consistently is going to be, and this is going to piss people off, direct thread. However, there are some really good mounts out there. I'm a big fan of the dead air mounts. I think they do a good job. But every time you add a junction, you add the potential for error. So keep that in mind. Do I think that dead air's got the house pretty tight? Yeah, yeah. But think about this for a second. Let's say you got a half 28 barrel and you only got a 30 caliber brake because they're $80 a piece or $90 a piece for the damn brakes, right? So you put a thread adapter between your half 28 barrel up to your 30 caliber thread, your 5/8 24, and then you put your brake on there, and then you put your can on. So instead of having your thread into can, you've got a thread into a thread into a thread into a brake and a brake into a can. How many junctions did you just create and how much error did you just stack? And if you're gonna, particularly if you're gonna do that crap, I do not suggest that you do that crap. But if you're going to engage in that kind of behavior, then you definitely need an alignment rod and you need a big bottle of Rock Set to make sure that it doesn't move around. Do flash suppressing end caps, such as the ones for the dead air Salmon, actually work? Worth the money? Question mark. I am. Here's the thing. I have some experience. I've tested about 4 different cans with flash suppressing end caps. Do they have some kind of impact? Yes. Is it a prolific impact on the performance of the device? No. So if you're looking for a small edge on the flash, then yes. You are much better off, though, buying more can than trying to augment it after the fact. So generally speaking, a K can is going to be flashy, no matter what. A flow-through can, like, you know what, I'm not going to name any names. Flow-through cans, by their nature, are going to be flashy. So you'll see a lot of those kinds of cans have additional things that you can add to the end of them that is supposed to do something. Generally speaking, I would be very skeptical of those. Do they have some impact? Yes. Is it a huge impact that you're going to massively, it's going to be night and day, like all of a sudden it went from like, wow, it's super flashy to now it doesn't make a signature at all? No, that doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. So it was either almost nothing to begin with, and then you added the flash suppressor and it knocked it down the last little bit, or it was really flashy and it's just ever so slightly less flashy. The other thing that you have to pay attention to is it also depends very heavily on the caliber, because if there isn't any flash suppressant in the powder, then you may also be kind of fighting against it. So, like, if you're shooting varmint loads out of your AR, you might not get the same results if you were shooting like 193 or something like that. So those loadings have some kind of flash suppressant in the powder, provided that it's to spec, to help dial that down a little bit. So be careful when you're talking about mixing commercial grade ammunition with the real designated stuff. So that's what I would say about that is when you talk about flash suppressant, you can't take shelf ammo and expect flash suppressed performance. There are some that add it, but you have to know that, and to do that you have to go test it. It's not going to damage your night vision, but you need to go test it to know whether that's going to be compatible or not. Somebody said I just use wooden towels from Home Depot. My goodness gracious, man. You troll people that hard and you're going to result in somebody blowing up their can. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. No. Can you get a mount to convert a rugged suppressor to a dead air key mount? I'm not sure if the ASR thread. I would have to check to see what the mount threads. I'd have to look and see because I haven't looked at the rugged in at least a week and how that attaches. Generally speaking, the rugged mounts are pretty good because they use a taper lock system. I'm pretty happy with the way Rugged did their mounts. However, their mounts were created before the dead air mount became what it is today. So I'm not trying to diminish that mount at all. It's a good mount, and it has also got a lock that will only allow it to unscrew so far before it gets to the dangerous point. So also, as the thing heats up, it basically seizes up, so you can't turn it at all when it's hot. So I think that Rugged did a good job. I don't know that there's a reason to specifically go to the key mount over the Rugged's mount if that's what you're already using. So unless you're trying to make everything the same, not entirely necessary. I think it's a decent amount. Somebody says Mark Baracco. I see him a lot. Thank you for participating in a lot of stuff. I do notice some people that do a lot of commenting. He says there. It's great to hear that the dead air mounts are good because I have several. Do we still need to use those rods to align? Yes, you should. Uh, the reason why you should do this is because part of the dead air mount does require it to go inside the can. And because of that, at some point, it is going to get some carbon on the thing. And that may, not saying that it will, but it has the capacity to be able to change how it's oriented. And because of that, you want to be sure before you send a high velocity projectile down the pipe that a baffle isn't in the way. So now let me check one thing real quick, guys. Still screaming. Okay, yeah. I saw something in the setup when it came to this whole thing that it was gonna time out in an hour, and I just think that was erroneous information from YouTube. So anyway, I just want to check to make sure because we're just over the hour mark now, and I wanted to make sure that the stream is still up. So yes, my answer is please invest in the alignment rods. Just like you have tools for everything else, you need probably a 30 caliber rod and probably a 20 caliber rod. You know, again, you can probably get away with just those. SOCOM. Surefire are the ones that I use, and I've never had a problem with any of my cans that I use them on. There are cans that I wish that I had used them on. Anyway. What about cans that have extra venting out of the front, like the OSS and the BNT, versus cans that don't? Is there a big difference in flash and noise? That's what I was referring to. Generally speaking, yes. I am also not going to throw those. I've not officially tested. So here's the thing. I try not to talk about devices, positive or negative, in any capacity that would relate directly to me testing a device if I have not tested that device. I have not officially tested either the OSS or the BNT cans. Those companies are welcome to reach out to me. I would love to test their devices. I had something working with OSS at one point in time, but my point of contact at OSS left, so that kind of all fell apart. And generally speaking, the big hang-up that for me when it comes to working with companies that make suppressors is you have to look at it in terms of the market, and the market is much smaller than the larger gun market, which kind of upsets me. But because it's a much smaller market, oftentimes companies can be very sensitive to you saying things about their product because they have to scratch and fight for the customers that they have. And what that results in is that a lot of companies just simply won't agree to our terms of service. And what that means is basically I'm allowed to say whatever the hell I want. And this is off of my experience. I'm not going to just go out and be like, I don't like the way it looks. You know, therefore it gets an F. No. I have to put it through a testing matrix to derive some data, to draw some conclusions from, and you don't get a say. You don't get to pick the matrix that I'm going to run it through. You don't get to do that. I do give companies a final review before it goes and publishes. For the most part, that's so that I make sure that I didn't spell anything wrong. But generally speaking, they're going to know kind of what's going to come out about their device. So if they need to react to something, then they can. But they can't interfere. And a lot of companies, unfortunately, don't like that. And so that's just a non-starter. They just don't go anywhere. So if you saw a can featured on this channel, or excuse me, on the main channel, for a review of an eval, then that company agreed to the terms of service that said, hey, we want you to evaluate the can and tell us how we're doing, how can we improve it, all the things associated with it. To get in the door, they have to agree to that. So Again, doors open to any company. Shoot shot. Alignment rods are cheap insurance, beats waiting to get a baffle stack fixed. Now, generally speaking, as far as that is concerned, if you damage your baffle stack and you don't damage the serialized portion of your can, then generally speaking, you can send it back to the original manufacturer and they can re-core your can. Again, provided that the damaged component is not integral to the serialized portion. So if you blow up a monocore and it doesn't damage the outer tube, which is a serialized portion, you're good to go. They can recore that, and a lot of warranties do cover that. There are several companies that do warranty stupid. I'm not gonna list them all, but there was one manufacturer I was talking to where they're like, if you throw it off of the top of a mountain and run it over the truck, if you can give me a piece that has the serial number on it, we'll fix it for you. A lot of companies do stand by their work, so it's not as bad as waiting, provided that the serial, you don't have to wait for a new tax stamp unless you've substantially damaged or compromised the serialized portion of the can. Is there enough difference between, say, a flash hider and muzzle brake in can performance to warrant selecting the brake? Would it perform as an additional baffle? Okay, so this is okay. I'm going to divide this into two things. So what the person's talking about is if you're using a QD mount, do you select the flash suppressor that is the mount, or do you select the brake that is the mount? And I'm going to divide that in two and say that on one hand we have using using one of those two and then not using it at all and going with a direct thread mount. The direct thread mount is going to give you more volume in the blast chamber. So if you use a direct thread mount, you don't have a hunk of metal that is literally taking up the volume that is your expansion chamber. And therefore, you get a more efficient blast chamber. You get to use the space. However, some cans do perform better if you create some chaos inside that blast chamber. Usually, if it's properly constructed in my mind, those cans tend to be a little bit larger because they've accounted for the fact that they want you to put a mount up inside there that's going to deplete the volume of that expansion chamber. So you get a expansion chamber and some chaos going behind it. Now, it depends on the design. And I know that's a crap answer, but generally speaking, I prefer to go with a flash suppressor on the end of as my QD mount because I think that it adds the most utility in your life when the can isn't on there. I don't really see that much of a difference if there's a flash suppressor versus a brake. Now, again, you're going to have to test them side by side depending on the individual design. But what I would say is the best way that I can describe this is I want you to go back and watch the video I did on the dead air pyro, which was an ingenious design for the issues or for the purposes that I'm not going to like really dive heavily into on the stream. It was an ingenious design to circumvent some tyranny. But when I use the flash suppressor in the pyro, it is much louder and much more flashy than if I used the comp, which is counterintuitive in my mind. I thought it would be the exact opposite. But it turns out that I think that lends itself to discussing what's going on inside of a can, in that you've already kind of created these dispersed jets that are forward traveling instead of directed at the sidewalls. And because of that, I feel like that gives more opportunity for the suppressor to do its job the way it was designed than if you tried to just immediately divert the gas into the sidewalls. The exception to that I would say is they did a can a couple years ago called the Elevated Silence Evolution, and in that instance, I believe that they only include brakes because they actually have a dual baffle stack. So they have a inner baffle stack that goes down one track and it times off of the front port on your brake. And then it has an outer channel that the gas flows through out of the proximal port on the brake. So in that instance, I think yes, a brake is much more useful because it does that. Most cans are not constructed that way. So again, individual designs. So I know that's a crappy answer. Me personally, I go flash suppressor. Somebody says they're trying to standardize on the data or key mount to reduce the amount of muzzle devices. Bro, I don't want to hear it. I have 2 full drawers of suppressor mounts, okay? Some of which play together and some of which don't. So you're complaining to the wrong guy, man. But yeah, I mean, there is value to having all your stuff work together. That whole modularity side of things, I understand. The chances are that you're never going to get there. Just gonna say that. Sorry. Okay, so I know this is a very circumstance dependent thing, but I'd like to see a robust comparison of flash signature of a bunch of cans under night vision and in slow motion, preferably on the same night. Okay, here's the problem. The best recording equipment that I have that can record in full night vision, as in the ability to get an image through the PVS 14, is 60 frames per second. Any faster than that, and you require so much light that it's almost impossible to capture. So you're watching most videos that I publish are in 30 frames per second playback, somewhere in 24 depending on how artsy I'm being. But generally speaking, most playback that you're seeing is somewhere between 30 and 60 frames, 24 to 60 frames, somewhere in there. If I'm exporting video at 30 and I'm recording at 60, I can slow it down by 50%, which isn't very much. Okay. If you are shooting a quote unquote high speed camera in broad daylight, the brightest of brightest days outside, you still end up with a really dark image. And you actually need to put mirrors up to be able to redirect sunlight at your subject. So moving that mentality to total darkness simply does not work. There is not enough light on any amount of day or in any amount of moon. It can't be done. At least not with current technology. I'm just telling you that. It can't be done. So, sorry to burst your bubble, but you're not going to see that kind of analysis probably for at least the imminent future until the technology gets much more sensitive and shrinks. So signature, that's one of the reasons when I go out and test cans, I don't just shoot the gun once or twice. I shoot it like 10 times and record it because sometimes we're just going to miss the capture, as in like the flash happens and then the photosensor wipes over the space where the flash was and it never picks it up, right? So that whole rolling shutter technology, it's a great technology, but it doesn't capture everything all the time. And to get that, you have to ramp the frame rate up. The problem with higher frame rates is you need a crap ton of light. And sorry, you're probably just not going to get that kind of analysis. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to just shoot a whole bunch of times. And then you can kind of draw a reference from that, because that's the technology that we had to work with. So I suppose we could do we could do whatever ASR cans we have. We could go out and do that, and use the key mounts, because those are again the most prolific ones, or excuse me, the most numerous ones that I have. But I don't have that many ASR compatible. I have a couple ASR cans. I don't think it would be a very good sample size. Thoughts on host selection for cans? Okay. So I'm currently also working in the background on my 1 hour lecture on cans, and I've only got a couple segments filmed of it. It's just a bear of a video to do. You guys have been bugging me to do it for a while, and in that video will be a discussion about host selection, but basically the breakdown goes sort of like this. The best suppressor host that you could possibly get is a manually cycling action shooting subsonic ammunition. And that's the really quick and dirty on the ideal suppressor host. Everything else is a compromise from there. So if you wanted to be semi-automatic, then you have to put some kind of gas operation in there, and that's going to be louder. Okay? So that's automatic. That automatically deletes, that automatically compromises the system by making it semi-automatic. If you want to shoot supersonic projectiles, well, you've already compromised the situation. So once we have that discussion, and we've agreed that we want supersonic projectiles and we want semi-automatic, then in my opinion, the best firearms are going to be your delayed blowback firearms. So things that have some kind of gas inertia system that doesn't allow the bolt to immediately open. It delays its opening by some degree. Okay? And then right there with it, like neck and neck, tied for number 2, right, is a direct impingement gun. And people are going to freak out about that and say, what about my piston guns? Piston guns suck. Suppressed, unless you turn the gas off. So if you want super quiet suppression, yeah, go up to the top, spin your piston all the way off, and it'll sound great. But you have to manually cycle that action. Those piston guns, generally speaking, vent gas at a much higher pressure, and it's going to be much louder. The worst culprit that I have ever seen is the SIG 556. Do you guys remember that one? My goodness gracious. You want to talk about a gun that will make your ears bleed suppressed. It's those piston guns. Just they are all right. We have to fix the chat here. We got a how do we block a user in timeout? Okay, we had a bot hop in. Where was I? Sorry. Oh, piston guns. Piston guns, generally speaking, are louder. Our long stroke pistons are going to be much worse than short stroke pistons. But generally speaking, when you're talking about tapping gas off and then immediately venting it right out of the barrel, that is much worse, venting it into the ambient space where your ears are, than if it has to travel down the tube first. The byproduct of that, unfortunately, is that you end up usually with a black mark right here, where that gas has come out of the ejection port and spattered itself on your face. Right? Usually, it's in the shape of whatever eye pro you're running. So somebody says, Somebody asked about an MRDX. I have not tested that. Piston. Somebody says the piston guns ran much more reliable when I was still in the Army when running a suppressor. That is, I'm going to guess that that was not an adjustable gas block direct impingement gun. I'm going to guess that it was just whatever was issued or available. It was just a direct tap. You have to moderate those guns. You have to dial that down. And generally speaking, the mid-length gas system is accepted to be the gold standard nowadays. So the mid-length gas system with an adjustable gas block is generally accepted to be the gold standard for a suppressed firearm. Unless you're trying to go to a delayed blowback gun, and usually those guns only work really well in pistol caliber stuff. So like your MP5s, which I hate, it's a terrible gun, but usually your pistol caliber stuff is the stuff that is going to be your delayed blowback guns. And that has to do with a balance of the weight of the projectile and all that sort of stuff and the amount of energy that's being created. You generally can't do that very well. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's not super reliable in centerfire rifle cartridges. Would 300 blackout or 8.6 black subs be more optimal for projectile selection than others for the reasons that you mentioned? I am a huge fan of 300 blackout. 8.6 blackout, I am going to reserve. I'm going to reserve my judgment on 8.6 blackout until I see some real data. The stuff that they had shot this year was not what I needed. I heard a whole bunch of stuff. I had 50 people come up to me like, Kurt, you're the suppressor dude. You need to go find out about the A6 blackout. And then I got the pitch, both at the range and at the show, and I found it unimpressive because they just did not have the stuff that I needed to see. I need to see supersonic recoveries, preferably with some kind of machine bullet. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see hollow point bullets that you've recovered. No. You can already do that, right? I don't want to see subsonic recoveries. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, Tim, the guy who said unreliable, piston stuff, he was using a 416. Yeah, of course. The 416. Although heavy, not really sure what the ultimate purpose of that gun was other than to sell another gun to the government. Yeah. Not a fan of the 416. Not only that, but it's not just the guns they wanted to sell. They wanted to sell all the service parts because there's not a lot of parts compatibility. They look very similar. There's a lot of incompatible parts on like the M4 compared to the 416, and Agent K wanted to sell those guns to the U.S. military, so that then they had to buy their parts too. Speaking of manual action suppressor hosts, do you know anything about the Franklin Arms Providence? I've seen this gun. I have not tested it. People at my Franklin Armory call me. I would love to test this gun. Pulling trickle cycles, the action, and when it fires, bolt drops, but vaporware. Yeah, unobtainium, right? Hard to get. So, I'd be interested to see how that gun is doing as far as sales are concerned. But it's a very interesting concept. One of the things I really like about Franklin Armory is they are not afraid to poke and prod and be like, hey, we can do this and you can't do anything to us, like that sort of thing. I like what they're doing there. I think that they've made some mistakes in the past that we won't get into, but as far as that is concerned, I don't consider that what we're talking about. Because the reason that those guns are awesome is because the bolt remains closed. And I'd have to see that gun fire in slow motion to make sure that there is no bolt bounce, so it doesn't actually open when the bolt falls. Does it lock when it falls? I'm going to guess probably not. So I'd have to check it to see, and that would be something that we would evaluate when we got that gun in for testing. But I can't say anything. Um, sorry, we got another. Um, we got another person that is here to basically spam our chat. So fix that really quick. Somebody says, I've never heard somebody say they hate the MP5. I hate the MP5, okay? And the reason I don't like the MP5 is because it's not necessarily that it is not a good suppressor host. I think that generally speaking, it is not a quality manufactured firearm. It is a stamped piece of sheet metal with some trunnions. And it should not be selling, the commercial variants should not be selling for what they are selling for. It should not be happening. There's no reason that a gun that is that cheaply made should sell for the money that it is selling for, and it is all H&K. Everybody bitches about price gouging. That is price gouging right there. And it's completely unacceptable. Bots aren't people. Yeah. So, yeah, we got a bunch of bots basically screwing up our chat, so I'm sorry about that. I had to scroll through it. There's a way, we just have to stay on top of it. There are ways to do that in the future. And as we get into more streams, again, I wanted to start streaming on the regular because I started doing it before I had some issues with YouTube, but then I kind of got behind because of the issues associated with getting a bunch of content from the channel pulled. So now I'm going to try to get back into doing it regularly. So I got the content on the channel pulled, and then I immediately went on vacation, and I spent 2 weeks catching up, and here we are, mid-July, and I'm finally back to it. So I basically went dark on the live streams for a month. So sorry about that. Yeah. So anyway, the future of the testing apparatus that you guys saw in the original video. Obviously, like I said, we're going to do a dedicated video, cans head to head, for every 30 caliber can that I have. And then I plan to incorporate that test in all can testing going forward. So the idea is, in addition to the flash test, in addition to the accuracy test, in addition to the absolute audio test that we do, all that sort of stuff, it'll get a recoil test. So that's how I plan to use that going forward. So you guys will see that as a recurring theme in the future. And then I think there's some other things that we should test in the future. Like we mentioned in the beginning, we should also do that video where we put a weight on the end of the gun and show you that, yeah, it's not just the fact that you made the thing heavier. We should do that just as a simplistic way to put it in people's face so that, because not everybody's going to watch this stream. So directing them to a particular minute on the stream, if I just make a dedicated video for it, then it'll be easier for you guys to use to rebut people. And that's one of the things I really like about generating some of this type of content, is so that you guys can use it in your discussions at the watering hole, if you will. So it's not just educating you guys and helping present info to you guys. It's also arming you guys with information to be able to go out and educate other people. So that's part and parcel why I do what I do. It's not just for the purposes of gaining clicks and likes and all that sort of stuff. I very much like it when a piece that I have put out helps influence downstream behavior, not just from the people that are watching the video directly. So Oh, okay. And then to the cans that you guys will see in the coming video this week. So I gotta find my sheet here. I also want to make it so you guys can't see it. So where did it go? I think that's right. All right. So my can list that I tested is as follows. I only selected one can from each manufacturer because I have multiple looks from each manufacturer, but I didn't want to unfairly weight the test for any particular manufacturer. So every manufacturer only got one entry. And that left us with a total of, by my count, 9 cans. So we've got the AB Raptor, which you guys saw me recently do a video on. The Energetic Arms Vox, which is the one that I go to quite regularly. The Bowers 30T, which is a titanium, what I would say, precision rifle suppressor. The Bushmaster Muta, which I did a video on this from this past winter, which also was fairly impressive. Somebody mentioned Rugged previously. We'll be putting the Rugged Surge. And the other thing I wanted to say is all these cans will be done in the stock configuration. So the stock configuration of the Surge is the full baffle stack. You have the option of shortening the baffle stack if you so desire. And no additional additives to them. So, for instance, the AB Raptor has the ability to reflux the can and put a big expansion chamber on it. Did not do that in the video. It did not get the extra augment. It's just the base suppressor as it comes. So some of those cans get more baffles. Some of them get than is possible. But the important thing is that it's in the factory configuration. So the Surge gets the full baffle stack, not the last 2 baffles removed. Stealth Projects Fusion. So we had 2 cans from them in here. The Fusion is going to be a rapid fire can. It's going to be, the Fusion is literally in the names, gives you an idea. It's an amalgamation of metals. We had their Bolt version, and it's an all aluminum suppressor. So we went with the one that I thought was going to be most applicable to most people, which is going to be a semi-automatic 30 caliber can. So their Fusion is what was entered. We left the aluminum can off. We also left the rugged help me. Rugged Razor. The Rugged Razor was left off because Rugged already got the Surge entered. Elevated Silence Evo. Mentioned them previously in the video. Theirs is a titanium suppressor. It's got 2 chambers in it, so that was cool. Did I say that right? Elevated Silence Evo. Yeah. Then we have 2 K cans. So we had the Sandman K. So that's the smallest Sandman that you can get. And then we had the Whip Machine's Dirty 30 in the test as well. And that rounds out all 9 of the ones that will be tested. That is 9, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh my gosh, I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, that's 9. Okay. Make sure that I didn't forget any. So those are the ones that you guys are going to see in the video this coming week. So be looking out for that head-to-head. It should be good. We're also going to go more in depth to the testing setup in that video. Talk about some of the changes that I made from the initial kind of crappy run that I did to kind of build the thing. And then also specifically some of the math briefly, so that everybody can kind of see where I got my numbers and why I did it that way. So just stay tuned. I won't make it super high level. It's all like high school math anyway, so it's not like you need to know calculus to be able to do it or anything like that. Simple algebra and trigonometry. Nothing real big. But I know that doesn't translate super well to a YouTube video, so we're gonna briefly touch on it so you can see why I used what I used. and I think it translates well. So anyway, we're going to check the chat one more time, and then, guys, I've not eaten since noon, so I'm going to need to eat something. So let's get out of this and go back to the chat. My name is not Kirk. My name is Curtis. And anybody who spells their name with a K, you should Curtis with a K, you should never trust. Always the C. So I'm new to the channel. I do not own any suppressors. I went to buy my first can for my DD Mark 18. What will you recommend me to get? Okay. So if memory serves me, the Mark 18 is a 10.5-inch barrel 5.56 gun, and I believe that it has a carbine lane gas system. The problem with that is that the carbine lane gas system is going to overgas your gun quite a bit when it's suppressed. So I would say that you're going to want, more than most likely, and you're going to hate me for this because the gun's already a brick. You're probably going to want something like a stainless steel or Inconel suppressor, because it's going to have a short barrel, and because it's got a short barrel, it's going to have to soak up a lot of extra overburn. And 5.56 short barrels are horrendous for suppressors. So I would look at cans that are constructed out of some kind of steel, either Inconel or stainless steel. I guess other steels are fine. It should be a steel can, okay, or a titanium can. Titanium cans, I'm going to, again, push you a little bit away from the titanium cans, because if you're going to do a lot of rapid fire, then you may run into some issues with your titanium cans, because they still do melt. And because it's a Mark 18, that needs to be a 5.56 specific can. So I know that a lot of guys want to buy a 30 caliber can and then adapt it to a 5.56 gun. Specifically for your Mark 18s, you need to buy 5.56 specific cans, because they're that hot dog down a hallway. You already got problems with overburn and all that sort of stuff. You need a dedicated 5.56 can for that gun. So, sorry about you. Does the can selection criteria change with the length of the barrel of the weapon? I'm primarily thinking about a 20-inch ARs and M16s. If you're looking at that, you can get away with a lot less can than you would out of a short gun. So K cans shine much greater when you've got them on a really long gun, right? So a really good example of this is the Bowers Biddy, right? It's that little tiny suppressor I did a while ago. It's a 22 suppressor, right? 22 Magnum, 5.7, you know, rated, all that sort of stuff. But it's like this big. Everybody sees that and they want to immediately throw it on a pistol. And I don't think that's the correct thing. While it's designed to be able to handle a pistol, and it's optimized for a pistol, in my opinion, it shines on a 26-inch 22 rifle, because it's far away from your face. And you've taken that little tiny thing and added it all the way at the end of the barrel. It's not nearly as punishing as a full-length suppressor. In my opinion, that's the optimum use for it. I use it on my Ruger Precision rifle, and it's great. But it's going to be a little bit louder out of your pistol. So yes, the gun absolutely does matter. And it all has to do with not only the amount of powder that you're burning out of the general percentage of the powder load that you supplied, but also how far that vent is away from your face. So if it's, you know, whatever this distance is away from your face, that's a lot closer than if it's all the way at the end of the, you know, long rifle's barrel. So yes, it does matter. And once you get on the short end, a lot of suppressor manufacturers will have barrel restrictions. So some of them will stop at that 10-inch mark. Um, yeah. Uh, have you filled cans with CO2? I have not. I would like to do that as a means to eliminate first round pop, because first round pop is generated, at least the accepted theory for first round pop is that it is ignition of ambient oxygen atmosphere in the can, and then you basically fill that can up with combustion products, and now there's no more oxygen for it to pop with. I would think that CO2 would eliminate first round pop. I would think. I've not tested it. I would like to see if there's some way that we could put inputs into the can to be able to do that. The problem with that is any system that allowed you to instantaneously put CO2 into the can would also pressurize whatever lines that you put into the can with whatever the pressure is inside the can when the gun's fired. So you probably destroy your own apparatus every time you did it. So you could, in theory, take like a chunk of dry ice or something like that and put it in the blast chamber, provided you didn't jostle it around a whole lot, and see if that does anything. But I think it would be cool to see. It would be a good way to demonstrate what first round pop is composed of. It would be a good argument if it worked, um, that first round pop is generated by oxygen content. Is it a practical thing to do for everyday shooting? Probably not at all. Is it a practical thing for design? Probably not at all. But it would be a cool thing to do. I'll consider it. 10 millimeter auto suppressor recommendations. I would be shooting heavy subs to proper loads. A 45 suppressor should be fine. 45 suppressors should be fine for 10 millimeter. I have not seen a single. I'm not going to say they don't exist, but I have never seen a 45 caliber suppressor expressly say that 10 millimeter is not okay. So, yeah. Somebody says, do you think that DMLS will ever completely or mostly replace traditional machining for new suppressor production? I don't know what that acronym means. Can you quickly figure out what help me figure out what that is? I'm maybe thinking that might be additive manufacturing of some kind. Uh, Completely replace? No. Augment? Yeah, probably. That will really depend on the cost of the technology. And if it continues to go down, then you'll see more and more augmentation of that into the into or excuse me, integration of that to augment current processes. Oh, yeah. Direct metal laser sintering. Yeah. Additive manufacturing. It's really cool technology. If you've never seen one run, it's really freaking cool. Um, do I think that it will replace current manufacturing processes? Mm, entirely? No. I just think that I think that currently it's still rather expensive to do. And because of that, it's going to continue to compete. If the technology got drastically cheaper, then it may take over a large percentage of it. The problem that I have is that, generally speaking, the gun industry is kind of old school and they don't turn very quickly. So I see a lot of companies still making their mounts probably through traditional means. And also, I'm not saying the technology can't handle it. I'm just saying that I think that I feel more comfortable with something that's been CNC'd. Not that it matters, because, you know, generally speaking, when you have a failure of one of those parts, generally it all just kind of goes down range anyway. You get a little bit of pucker factor, but generally speaking, it's every incident that I've ever had or seen happen where we had a part fail. Generally, it went down the danger route anyway, and there should be nothing down there that you were worried about destroying anyway. Yes, so that's my answer on direct laser sintering. I like the stuff that I've seen that's been done in this, particularly the Inconel stuff. Um, I would like to see a direct analysis on alloy composition between direct laser sintered parts and ones that are traditionally machined. And if you can get the cost to be equivalent and the alloys to be perfectly similar, no, congruent. If you can get them to be congruent, then yes, I think that it could take over, but I don't know. It still takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy to do that. So, anyway, guys, we've been at it for almost 2 hours now, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up the stream tonight. And if you have any more ideas for future videos, I have a couple in the works here that I've added since we started. And I really like doing the kind of like the sponsored video where I've got an ad that allows me to then just go do a thing that I've always wanted to do. And somebody really got on me in the comments of the other video because they're like, your channel's not what it used to be because you just do a whole bunch of testing stuff now. Yeah, because that's the stuff that I always wanted to do, man. Right? But I could never do it because the atmosphere for paying for that content, this is my full-time gig. Like, I have to pay the bills. So I can only do so many projects off of overhead, if you will. And now the culture kind of um, at the user level, you guys have now gotten used to a video somewhere around the 2 to 5 minute mark across all of YouTube. You've gotten used to time to pay the bills, guys, and you guys don't even care anymore. If I had done that 4 years ago, bloody murder, okay? But the content has evolved and the platform has evolved, such to the point where the user's tolerance for a single burned-in ad into a video that can then help recoup the cost of the time, energy, money, all that sort of stuff to make the content is now much more feasible. And besides, I get to help out companies that maybe they don't have a thing that they need to that needs to be tested at that level. To do a suppressor test, right? To go out and take a single can, and go out and produce the video that you guys ultimately see requires approximately 4 hours per edited minute that you watch. So if I produce a 20-minute video, that means that you've got somewhere around an 80-hour investment in that work. I don't know how many hours you guys work a week. I work a crap load of hours every week. And 80 hours does not fit into most people's work week. Fits into my work week. But generally speaking, it takes a lot of time to do that full evaluation. Because you guys might see, a couple seconds, but you had to get there, you had to set it up, you had to do all the outtakes, you had to make sure it's framed right, you have to, do the other things that you were there today, you had to do the maintenance, you have to make sure the guns run when you get there, you have to have the ammunition, you have to, right? And then once you capture it all, you got to get it back and categorize, and you got to edit it all into something that's coherent, right? So there's a lot that goes into it, right? So to be able to have a method to be able to tell you guys about things that otherwise just would never make it on the channel because like they don't have 80 hours worth of testing to be done, right? Like there would be, what am I going to do when it comes to testing blackout coffee, right? Other than I drink it every freaking morning, right? What do I need to go get do I have to go buy a mass spectrometer and get three-phase hooked up to my place to be able to do a direct analysis of the ingredients in blackout coffee? Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? But I can do a blackout coffee ad on something and I can help out my friends by doing that, right? So like there's the evolution of the content over time has just changed, and yeah, things will change. If you don't change, you just keep doing the exact same thing over and over and over again and expecting better results, then you're just never going to get it. So that's why some of the things that you've seen shift, there are guys out there that are just better at doing the go fast shoot stuff thing than I am. You can name 10 of them off the top of your head, right? To the point where if me and Brandon Herrera went out there and started, just running up and doing sprints up and down the flat range, it would look really weird, right? versus if other people did it, right? So I prefer to use my background to do something constructive. And yeah, so that's why some of the content has changed. We still like to do the other stuff. It's just not the main body anymore. Okay. Anyway. Oh, don't get me wrong. We still blow stuff up. Somebody says, come on, it's fun to watch stuff blow up. Yeah, we still blow stuff up. Yeah. Whenever something blows up, we try to find a way to include it. Anyway. Guys, that's all I've got for today. We are solidly at 2 hours of stream time. Thank you all for joining in. And hopefully we'll see you guys on a future stream here at Beyond VSO. Thank you all for subscribing. It does help out. I've been trying to get those numbers up to the point where I can access all the controls. Because right now I haven't checked the subscriber count, but there's a minimum count that you have to obtain on any like secondary channel to be able to access all the controls. All of which I have access to on my other channel, but I want to segregate live stream content from the continuous content that I put up on the channel, just because I feel like live stream can happen at any point in time, and it can be relatively trashy content that may not rise to the level that I'm used to putting out there, and I also have to use my channel as my portfolio. So all that said, I want to separate the stuff out because I like to do other stuff on live streams as well. Like I have a couple games that I like to play. I find those very relaxing to talk about topics while doing a strategy game, and that just does not fit on the main channel. So again, thank you guys for the subscription. I hope that I earn it, and hopefully we'll have another one here in a week or so. Thanks for joining. See you later.